Hi, I'm Fletcher Rhoden, and my pet peeve for today is Beatle nerds. Okay, well, Pet Peeves is brought to you today, as every day, by my website, FletcherRhoden.com. That's where you can find links, such as the one to my Amazon.com author page. That's where you can buy my books in paperback, or for Kindle or in audiobook format. There's also a link to my Spotify artist page, where you can find all of my albums to download. I got a lot of them. In 2024, I had a 4-album set called Quadrilogy. In 2025, I have a brand new pop album called I'm Possible. Now you can download those or my other albums at Spotify, or also wherever you download your music. If you can download your favorite music, you can download mine at the same place. But at my website, FletcherRhoden.com, there is free music that you can get there exclusively. So check it out. Okay, today's pet peeve. Beatle nerds. Alright, the Beatles. Now I'm a musician, a lifelong musician and songwriter. Lots of albums. Last year in 2024 I had a 4-album set called Quadrilogy, and this year I've got a brand new album called I'm Possible. And it's pop music, and there's some Beatle aspects to it. I grew up listening to the Beatles. In fact, if you listen to the album Volume 1 of Quadrilogy, called Pop, there's a lot of Beatle-ish pop music on it. And in fact, my new album, I'm Possible, for 2025, also has a lot of Beatle-y sounds. In fact, two of the songs on I'm Possible are holdovers from the Quadrilogy collection, series rather, and they both have a Beatlesque kind of sound to them. So I get it. When I was a kid, I loved the Beatles. I grew up on the Beatles. They taught me much of what I know. Dylan also. For me, it was about an even split between Beatles and Dylan. And then other people too, of course, but, you know, when you're young, so on. So I get the Beatles. I get that they're attractive in a lot of ways. Iconically and musically, it's fun to listen to, and there's a lot of lore behind it, and there's a lot of fascination behind the bickering and the different personalities and the way they got along or didn't get along, and George Harrison, and I get it. And one of my pet peeves, interestingly, is not the Beatles themselves, because they were certainly a cut above your average Mersey band. I mean, we're not still seeing documentaries about Jerry and the Pacemakers, are we? So, and some of that music is good. I had my time with it. I don't listen to it for fun anymore at this time in my life. But it's hard to say that they didn't come up with a lot of good music. Hey Jude, a lot of the White Album is good. It's not that they weren't good. The Beatles aren't my pet peeve. It's the Beatle nerds who just obsess and fascinate and listen to everything. And, the Beatle reunion song, Now and Then, I didn't think it was that good. And I was surprised when it did as well as it did. I think it's just that the Beatle nerds are in such strong numbers, and they just love the Beatles so much. They're such Beatle nerds that they can't help themselves, And I get it. The Beatles are good for a time. We all go through our Beatle phase, and first, it's usually early on in our musical development. And sometimes it lasts a long time, because they had a lot of different styles and periods and things like that. It's not just one style to listen to. You can always go to different years, and right now Abbey Road, Rubber Soul is different than that, and so on. But honestly, the Beatle nerds ruin it. It's not the Beatles that are the problem. It's the Beatle nerds that are the problem. It's like Star Trek. Star Trek is not a bad TV show. I think of this skit when William Shatner was on SNL, excuse me, in the early 1990s or maybe the late 1980s, and he appears as himself at a Star Trek convention and says, "You people are wasting your lives. You know, this is stupid. You're making too much of this." And the only thing close to the Trekkies, which is that obsession over Star Trek, which I think is abated, is the Beatles, the Beatle nerds, the Apple Scruffs. You know, give it up. They were good, but I've heard people say that they invented the melding of country and rock. But they didn't. They just didn't. The Beatles hardly invented anything. They just artfully combined influences because they had 4 diverse sets of skills. No, they had 4 different tastes. So each one of them brought their taste. The one guy liked Chuck Berry style rock and roll. The other guy liked Broadway style show tunes. The other guy liked country Carl Perkins style, but eventually sort of got into the Middle Eastern thing. And the other guy, I think, just played whatever was going on at the time. So when we think of the Beatles, we're so interested in it because of these different combinations of things, but it's not such a, they didn't create anything. They didn't invent Indian music. They didn't create, you know, rockabilly or whatever that would be, whatever everyone's trying to be my baby now, which is just a cover of Carl Perkins, I believe. It's Carl Perkins. So people overcredit them. The Beatle nerds go overboard with the Beatles. Oh, don't say anything bad about the Beatles. Oh, well, let's see what you can ever do. Well, you're not the Beatles. Yeah, but guess what? I don't have to be the Beatles in order to say that they're overblown. Even George Harrison, who was one of the Beatles, said they were overblown. John Lennon said the same thing. And they were the Beatles. So take their word for it, not mine. If you want to talk about were the Beatles great, ask John Lennon. He seemed to think they sucked. He seems to say everything they did was crap. If you read his interviews, he pisses all over all of it. There's very little of it. He said, I've read things where he said, I would re-record every bit of it if I could. Because it all sounded like crap. And I think George Harrison more or less thought the same thing. And I think George Martin thought a lot of it was garbage. But what was he going to do? You know, he said, you're really going to put out Wild Honey Pie? Really? I know he didn't get the fact that it was a publishing thing and the Beatles were being smart by fulfilling their publishing contract by putting as many titles as they could on this big album, blah, blah, blah. I get it. He didn't. I do. But whatever. Not everything the Beatles touched was gold. And in fact, they weren't as inventive as they were clever. Because they always stole. First they stole from Motown. Then they stole from the other skiffle groups. Then they stole from Bob Dylan. Then they stole from, you know, like Rodgers and Hammerstein, basically. And then they broke up. And then John Lennon only ever stole from either Chuck Berry or Paul McCartney. And everybody apes from everybody, I get that. We all drink from the same water hole. We all drink Napoleon's pee, I get it. And that's fine. So if you like the Beatles, like them. I love them even. And declare them to be great. But let's keep it in check, Beatle nerds. They didn't really invent anything. You know, they weren't in a bubble. There was Hendrix there was Cream in there were the Beach Boys, there were the Rolling Stones, there was Bob Dylan, hugely influential on everybody. The Beatles didn't really invent anything, they were just there. And they were timely, and they were fast. So they made an album in a month. But Rubber Soul really apes the Byrds and Bob Dylan. That's the Beatles ripping off other artists. And they say how great it was that 4 guys made one album in a month. Well, guess what? Half those songs were written years before. And the songs they wrote at that time weren't that good. and they knocked it out quickly. 4 guys in 1 month. I made 4 albums in 1 month, and I'm one guy. But if you like the Beatles, like them. That's great. I kind of have a soft spot for them too. I can't deny it. Listen to I'm Possible, and you'll definitely hear Beatle things that are not just rip-offs, but homages. I mean, I did one thing where I ended it with a dun 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 with a 6/9 chord, which musicians will know is a very classic early Beatles ending chord. I did it as a goof. I was very close to putting on, to adding like the cheers of a TV studio audience of all girls cheering like at the end of a Beatles thing at the Ed Sullivan show. I almost did that just for goofball fun, but I didn't. However, I am going to post a link to that song below from my album I'm Possible, so you can check it out. And hear that I'm not so stodgy. It's not that I hate everything about the Beatles, and I recognize their influence. It's just that the Beatle nerds are obsessive. They obsess. They buy 12 copies of Abbey Road. They'll buy 12 copies of the White Album. How many copies of the White Album do you need? Well, here's one in stereo, here's one in mono, here's the one they did with this, and here's this version, here's the 8-track, here's the cassette, here's the CD, here's the CD re-release, here's the CD re-release with the masters and the new Cheshire demos or whatever the hell it is. Enough is enough. Climb out of your mother's basement. Go kiss a girl. You know? It's not the Beatles. It's the Beatle nerds. It's misplaced energy. They're not that good. If you want to put your energy somewhere, check out Miles Davis. Miles Davis's career was 5 times longer than the Beatles' career. And he did what the Beatles did 5 times over. So check that out. Anyway. It's not the Beatles, it's the Beatle nerds. That's my pet peeve. Now, maybe you disagree. Maybe you're a Beatle fanatic. Maybe you love the Beatles. Maybe you want to tell me that I'm nothing and they're everything and that I have a lot of bloody nerve. And if you want to say that, say it in my comment section. I'll read it and I'll respond in kind. Anyway, tune in also every other Monday here at this YouTube channel where I'm here with pet peeves. Sorry, because I'm a little bit confused because every other week I'm here at the same time, same channel, with a premiere of my other show, Quotes and Quips. So we've got Pet Peeves every other Monday, and alternating Mondays, Quotes and Quips. That's a show which is continuing its run from last year. I leave the reruns up, so you can always watch them, and you can see the reruns of last year's Quotes and Quips. All of them still up. It's like 26 webisodes, I think. And then there's also, from 2023, a show called Tracking the Lone Wolf on its own YouTube channel, Tracking the Lone Wolf. And that's based on my book, Tracking the Lone Wolf, which is available in paperback or for Kindle or in audiobook format, along with all my other books. Most of them are in audiobook format. All of them are in the other 2 formats, basically. And check it out. Check out my new album, I'm Possible. It's available wherever you like to download your favorite album. Check out the song below to put you in the mood. Tune in again, and until then, bye, Mary.